What's up guys, this is Andrew Frezza from Care Coach Lead, joined by Melissa Dixon, and today we're going to be talking about the role and the scope of the doctor versus that of the coach. And this is a framework we've been working through for really the last couple years. We at our gym have one of our members is a physical therapist, and he works on clients a couple days of the week inside of our gym. So we have a really good relationship with him. And the conversation that has come up for many, many years is, where are there clients that we can help as coaches? And then where are there clients that we should be referring over to him to work with some manual stuff, some hands-on stuff, or potentially where he's gonna then refer them out for imaging, MRIs, x-rays, things like that, if it's more severe than even his scope. So we've created some frameworks that we're working through, and we want to share those with you today. We're still kind of working through them, but as we're formulating them in our own head, we want to share them with you and give you guys the tools to start helping people right away. So this conversation originally started as this spectrum, this line right here, an acute injury versus a chronic injury. And the conversation we had with our physical therapist was, when anything is really acute, that injury just happened that day, that week, yesterday, whatever it is, then it's not usually something we want to touch as coaches. It's something that either that client needs to rest, they need to go to a physical therapist, or they potentially need surgery. Then when they go to chronic, those are things that have been happening for years. And what we learned through our conversation with this physical therapist is that whenever something is really acute or really chronic, it's not really our sweet spot as coaches. We really thrive more in the middle. Those injuries that are kind of nagging for a few months or a few years, but they're not super acute or super chronic. And then as we were working through this, we realized there was another aspect to this, and it was really this idea of mild versus severe injuries. And we've mapped this out as pain scale of 0 to 10, or not just pain, but the severity of injury. It doesn't, you could have a bad injury that's not necessarily super painful, but it requires a surgery or something serious to be able to fix it and repair it. So through this spectrum, we're gonna go through it and give you guys an idea of how certain things may or may not fall in these different 4 categories.
In this spectrum of injury, the first side that we're going to talk about is everything on that acute side. So everything on that sudden injury side, or that very prompted experience for someone, whether they just quickly were on the soccer field and did something, tweaked something, pulled something, and based on severity from mild to severe, it could be something as little as like a tweaked neck. I did a pull-up, my trap took over, and I got out just a little bit. That's only going to take a couple days to recover, and that's not going to be like a super painful, super
slept a little bit wrong.
Yeah, those kind of things where you wake up and you're kind of creaked, you can't really look to the left or look in your blind spot. Those are on the mild side, and those are going to take just a little bit to recover from. It might go away after a couple days. You might just need to visit a chiropractor, get it knocked off, and then you come back in and you're pretty fresh for the gym again. As we move up that severity list, it goes into things like the soccer field injury, the pulled hamstring, the rolled ankle, I fell off the box and I raked my shin, things like that, where you're in that more inflammatory, more pain scale, but still low in the relative of healing time. Intervention isn't really gonna need to happen. Maybe a little physical therapy work, but not much there. We're still under that severity line. Once we get above it, we start moving into things like sports injuries, like contact injuries in football, concussions, those kind of things, like a broken bone, compound fractures. We move into the car accident realm there.
Torn ACLs,
things that need surgeries. They need lots of rest time. They need lots of time for that inflammatory response to come down first before even surgery. So we're talking about multiple months, weeks, years, maybe even, for that kind of recovery.
Yeah, and in this category, you oftentimes have 2 acute severe things, which is the injury itself and then usually the surgery to fix that injury. So both of those tend to be pretty acute, pretty severe interventions that have to be done. One is the accident itself, and then one is the surgery to fix it.
Yeah, so we move into the other side of that, which these acute things can add up into things that become chronic things if not resolved as well.
So now on this chronic side, again, we have that similar spectrum from mild to severe. Sometimes, or maybe even a lot of times, what we see as a severe and chronic injury was oftentimes at one point an acute and severe injury that just was never fixed. Or what we see a lot in our gym is like a baseball player who used to play in college or professionally that tore their labrum, and that kind of ended their career. It was one aspect that worked them out of their sport, but they didn't need to get it fixed for their daily life. It wasn't a pressing issue for them to get that surgical repair for their daily life. But now as they start working out again, that labrum hasn't fixed itself, and it's still a pretty severe injury. It may not be causing a ton of pain necessarily, but it's been lingering for years, and in order for it to get really fixed, it will probably need a surgery at some point. On the lower levels of this, we put back pain there, and obviously back pain could fall anywhere on there, but what we commonly see is that so many people experience back pain, and it's very intermittent. It comes and goes. It might be there for a few months at a time, and then it might go away for a few months at a time. And yes, there's a varying degree of severity that could be there, but generally when we're talking about chronic mild things, they tend to have that intermittent aspect to it, like a shin splint as well would be another one, where it's not super severe, it's not super debilitating, but it's there and it's been there for years.
This could also include things like knee pain, that kind of low-grade chronic knee pain. Your athlete is avoiding running because they know it agitates it. They're not currently agitated by it, or it could be like shin splints, could be a chronic mild event, things like that. Plantar fasciitis I'd put in this category too. That tweaked neck that we had in acute over here, if it's happening and happening and happening, or that rolled ankle, if it's happening and happening, those kind of things can be that chronic unsolved issue that's falling now into this chronic category where it once was.
Yeah, so this is where the relationship comes in, and you digging in with that client, and usually this is going to have to happen outside of a class setting. It's going to have to happen in a phone call in a different time of day. It's going to happen with a consult where you're specifically meeting to talk about the injury. But one of the things you're going to find is that clients tend to make things seem smaller than they really are, and they'll talk about something as if it's acute, when really as we dig in, we find out, oh my God, there's a lot more chronic history here that we didn't know about. And sometimes it often takes you just reflecting that back to that person of, how long have you been dealing with this? Oh my God, that's a long time to be dealing with this. For them to realize, oh my God, I've been dealing with this for a while. It is more chronic than I initially was thinking about. And yeah, I probably do really want to fix it because I don't want to go another several years or decades with this.
I find that back pain one is the big one, and that's why we put it up here, of that, oh, I threw my back out again. But this always happens. It happens when I do X, Y, Z, and it's very dismissive in nature, and they have people who have also sympathized with that statement too of, yeah, I throw my back out when I do this too. And then it becomes this thing where, well, maybe we should look at your hips. Maybe we need to take a dive and see what's going on in your hamstrings, or, the fronts of your quads. What do we have that's adding up into this tweaked back that should be addressed, that's crying for help, but it's been 3 months since you had your back out. So it feels very acute to them.
Yeah. So in this slide, what we wanted to show you is the sweet spot of where the coach can work. And what this blue zone here is generally the more mild something is, the better chance we have as a coach to fix it. If it's mild and it's intermittent and they've had times in their life where that pain has gone away, then usually the solutions to fix that thing can be pretty minimal. They can be small, just smart approaches that when we do a movement assessment and we assess our clients, we figure out where we need to target, we can, with some good correctives, fix that issue. So the more mild, the better. And then we talked about it before, when something is really acute or really chronic, that tends to be the times where they may need to go see a physical therapist, they may need to go see an orthopedic and get some of that bigger picture feedback. So when we have clients that roughly are 6 or 7 out of 10 in pain-wise, and they've had that pain for weeks, months, or a year or two, that's kind of the sweet spot of the coach. And then those outside circumstances are where we want to usually refer out to a doctor or physical therapist.
Yeah, What we see outside of this on the acute side is normally things that are still in that inflammation response. You know, I pulled my hamstring, I can definitely help you with that, but we need to make sure you're getting all that inflammation out and that you're ready for exercise before you come back. Or I had a car accident and I resolved these things, and now we're in that chronic stage of something is recurring, and they're exercising in it. They fall outside of this because they've now created this sudden swelling of something that they shouldn't have been exercising on, or went a little too hard and inflamed it again. We need to get out of that inflammation spot. We need to make sure that we're resting before we intervene as a coach as well.
Yeah, so oftentimes rest or surgery can take someone from generally being just outside the zone and bring them into this zone so they are in the sweet spot. So just because a client isn't a good fit at this time doesn't mean they won't be in a few weeks or months.
Yeah, or after that surgery, they've completed their rehab, it's got them down to a 6, but they're not fully ready to go, 100% in their classes. They still need that ease back in. They still need hand holding on their transition back into full speed. They need a lot more work to put together their structure, or fix those strength imbalances that created that injury in the first place. Those kind of things need to happen, and that is in this zone as well.
Yeah, we'll dive into that in further videos, but we have to realize as coaches the gap between physical therapy and full speed in the gym, and that's our sweet spot. That's where we can really help and help clients see that there's a gap there. So yeah, just know that that's a place that you can really do some good work with your people.
So now that we've talked about that zone of where we can come in as a coach, there's a couple of ways that we do this as soon as we have that person who's coming back in from surgery on this side, or that person who's recovered from their rest, their elevation, their treatments from the chiropractor or whatnot. So if that person's acute, and if that person is dealing with a little bit of that lingering effect of that injury, we're talking about short-term solutions for that athlete. And this is what I think is like the best realm of the coach, or the most frequently exercised, the one that we find is in our wheelhouse. That person comes into our class and we're modifying their workout. We're giving them scaling options. We're making sure that they're not going back into that same pattern within our class. And that kind of stuff looks like maybe deadlifting from risers, or maybe subbing the bike instead of running, maybe doing a couple of, maybe a kettlebell deadlift instead of a swing, taking the dynamic motion out of things when people return to exercise. And I find that this is like where the coaches that I've seen are most comfortable exercising their power as a coach and giving directives to athletes.
Yeah, and I find that in here, especially if it's more acute, coaches are going to try to avoid rather than correct is kind of the approach. And someone can't take impact, so they're going to bike instead of run would be a good example. Or someone they're in a sling, hey, we're still going to get your great workout, we're going to do some legs, we're going to do some core, but we're going to avoid the shoulder. We're not trying to correct it at that point. We're just trying to get you a good workout, good safe workout that day, and we'll talk about correcting it later.
Yeah, and then so moving from that moves us into that chronic, or those people coming back from rehab, coming back from the bigger events or the chronic stuff. That kind of intervention for us, when the coach is involved, looks more like long-term solutions. So instead of deadlifting from risers, we're talking about moving with your movement assessment. Can you touch your toes? Can you push your heel to your butt? Can you move your hips in the right way that we need you to move? Is that what's creating this strength balance or immobility? What created that injury in the first place? And then once we investigate and find where that agitation was coming from, or maybe it's the labrum and they're internally rotated, we're doing the prescriptive work in this area. We are looking at correcting the strength imbalance. We're looking at putting back together their posture maybe, or helping them touch their toes, giving them like 3 to 5 days of prescribed work to get to the ranges of motion they need. Maybe it's reaching overhead that they can't accomplish, or holding that arm in a locked out position. Whatever that athlete needs or that client needs to get back to that full range of motion, that's the kind of stuff that we're giving them. And that's not stuff that we do inside of a class time. That's really dedicated prescriptive work.
Yeah, it's important to note that that's going to be really hard to do in a class setting. It's going to typically have to be done one-on-one. But that's great. That's a chance for you to have a conversation. If you work in a group facility or a one-on-one facility, it's a chance for you to sell a higher service package that has a higher solution to it, a higher value solution to it, where you're gonna help someone solve a problem that they've been dealing with for months and years and really be able to live their life pain-free, which is a massive value. So in that category, we're really trying to attack the root cause, and that's where you guys as coaches need to have skills that allow you to attack the root cause, like having a movement assessment at your arsenal and having these different assessments that you can use to dive deeper than just the surface level of what do I see when they're squatting, deadlift, and the feedback they're giving me.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about using our in-house PT, and we know that that's not something that's common to other gyms. They don't necessarily have someone that they're working directly with, because we send our athletes to that person and we say, okay, now tell us how to help them, because we realize we aren't the doctor. We aren't the person who's, inside of their joints. We're learning from physical therapists and kind of helping do his work through us in that way. So if you have anyone that you can reach out to, or maybe it's a physician, maybe it's a physical therapist, a chiropractor that's in your membership, talk to them, get with them. The more teammates you have on your team, the more tools you have in your toolbox as a coach.
Yeah, and then you can still serve as kind of like that person's general coach. You can kind of oversee that program and their prescription, even though you're referring out, and you can still check in with them. Hey, how did it go with the PT? How did it go with the doctor? Okay, where do I come in and guide that process for them, as opposed to just, hey, go see this person and it's off my hands, but now you're facilitating them getting back to where they want to go, which is ultimately our role as a coach. Understand why they're here with us, what are their big burning issues, and how can we get them to help solve those things.
The last thing that I wanted to say is, when we talked about coaches being really confident in this domain, this is where I see confidence kind of wane with people. It's coaches aren't comfortable having that conversation with the big ticket items, but they're also not as confident in being able to deliver those solutions. So when you do have that PT on your team, when you do have someone who is, really prescribing that work, or you are getting that from your client and carrying that accountability side out of, hey, I have to do this rehab, I'm supposed to do toe towel grabs and all these weird things, and you're the one that's prescribing and holding them accountable because they just got a sheet from their doctor that they're never going to follow through with. Being able to be that person for someone is invaluable. And the more you do that, the more you participate in that, the more it gives you confidence that you can help other clients in that way and know that you can find that outcome for them, that they can become pain-free. And that leads to retention in your gym, that leads to referral business of, hey, Andrew got my shoulder out of pain, he got my hips out of pain, you should see him because you're in the same spot I was. And they'll be sending you business in that way.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest problems that physical therapists have, is that they have trouble getting their clients to follow through with correctives. And if you can provide that structure and accountability to those correctives and add to that programming and those correctives with what you know and bring to the table, you're going to see they're going to love you for it, even though it may on the surface look like a conflict of interest. They're going to be really happy with it because they're going to get such better clients. They don't, even though they kind of stay in business by seeing clients over and over again, they don't want that. They want people to get fixed, or else they wouldn't be in this line of work. So I hope this is helpful for you guys. If you have any questions or anything that you feel like we missed with this framework here, leave it in the comments below. But thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.